So this is where the idea of thriving really comes in. And the idea of thriving, I'm very interested in this, and we started to do some research in this area. We've published one study on thriving in ASD, which I'll share with you in a bit. Okay, this is a nice long definition of people's attempt at understanding thriving. The next one that's not on here is, they say, but this is not the only definition, right? Because there's lots of different ways of putting words to it. But I like it for a few reasons. Thriving is an individual's pursuing a life path on which individually or functionally valued behaviors grow. Character, confidence, caring, and move the person towards attainment of an idealized personhood, characterized by socially and structurally valued behaviors, such as contributions to self, family, community, and civil society. It's a long, very long, kind of winded one, definition, but what I like about it is that what I bolded here. Where does it start? It's about a life path or a process in which behaviors, and what are the important behaviors? They're behaviors that are valued by the individual, okay? So that can be different from one person to another, what those behaviors are, what those actions or choices are. But what's fundamental to thriving is that those actions and those behaviors are valued to the person, are meaningful to the person, okay? And have functional value, right? They help move a person forward in the direction they'd like to go. Okay? And the second piece is move towards where? Move towards this idea of idealized personhood. What an interesting kind of way to think about things. It's not that you have to attain your idealized personhood. Okay? It's not the attainment of idealized personhood. It's moving towards idealized personhood. It's a process, an ongoing process. So thriving is it's not the end, as I say here. Okay? It's a process that's moving us towards that. It's an experience. Okay? It's the behaviors and choices and things that we do that move us towards where we would like to be, rather than actually ending up at the B. Okay? Because we don't have to have that as, that's not the end result isn't the experience. Okay? What an interesting idea that so how do we create a context, and how do we provide people with the strengths and the abilities to have an experience where they feel like they're moving forward towards something that they value, even if they don't achieve that end result. And I think that we all deserve to thrive. Right? I think thriving is inherently a human right. Okay? I think it's an experience that everybody, regardless of label, deserves to experience in their life in a developmentally appropriate way. Okay? This is something, indeed, that is developmentally appropriate. Thriving should look different for a 4-year-old than a 25-year-old. Right? And it should look different for you and for me. So it's an individualized experience. But I think we all deserve to experience thriving in some way. Okay? So Richard Lerner publishes a lot on positive youth development and this idea of thriving. And he's kind of coined the idea of 6 C's of positive youth development that we talk about as thriving now. And I like to joke that if you come up with another concept that starts with C, then you could add it and we can have 7 C's, and then it could be Lerner and then your last name. Okay? So, but until that's the case, it's just Lerner. But other people are out there. There's the Search Institute that has their 40 assets of this and their 40. Many different people are adding different words and different concepts. But it's all heading in the right direction. I like the 6 C's because it's rather parsimonious. And it's easier to study. So what are the 6 C's? It starts with competence. So there's a difference that they underscore between skills or abilities and competence. And what they describe of as really competence is the experience of the implementation of that skill, okay, or ability, okay, of what one person can do. Confidence is that sense of that I can do it, that I have that agency, an experience of confidence. Connectedness is another component or ingredient of thriving, of belonging, of being connected with others. Caring, and ability to express caring in your own way and experience being cared for, frankly, right, in a way that matters to you. When you experience that caring and you've had that confidence and you've reached out to others, right, that helps to build character. That helps an experience of what's important to you in terms of right and wrong. This idea of value and honesty and experience. And when we have these things together, we're more able to contribute in a positive way to ourselves, because we feel confident, we're able to reach out, because we're connected to others and to broader, to our community, right? So all of these together, this is not, again, it's not a bakery recipe list where you need three dashes of caring and 4 of connectedness. It's the idea that these are all important constructs. If we're going to talk about thriving, what do we mean? So for the rest of this, when I'm talking about thriving, I really mean these 6 C's, okay? So how do we measure these? And then how do we develop interventions to address them? And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of the morning. So how does Richard Lerner measure them? He's done a number of studies with thousands of typically developing youth and adolescents in the US in this 4-H study, where they follow them over multiple waves and look to see how do the youth's reporting of these 6 C's and the parents' reporting of these 6 C's change over time, and what influences those changes over time. What predicts how people grow or decrease, because you can grow, you can increase in these experiences or decrease over time. So they shared with, we've used these same measures as a starting point around our work in our survey-based research around thriving in ASD. So this is how they define it. And it's very cool that they don't have a large checklist of every component of competence and then every component of caring. They actually use a summary statement. And when I emailed them, Lerner, to ask, why don't you have a scale? I'm used to having a scale where you're asking about competence in 7 different ways, or with 7 different types of competence. Why do you put them all together by saying, my child has the skills to succeed in school, social situations with friends and adults, in play and at home, my child knows how to behave and does what's needed to do well? Why are you putting that all together? Why not have separate ones where you ask them then, how much do you agree with this statement? And the response was that that's a great idea for somebody to do, which is researcher code to be like, don't ask me, just go and do it. But the other kind of aspect of it was that they said is that it forces respondents to take a summary of their experience across a number of different dimensions, for better or for worse. So I think, so we started with this, and we're interested in developing better measurement tools, but we had the question, if we ask these questions to parents of youth with intellectual disabilities and parents of youth with autism, would they simply respond back and say, not applicable, this is just, doesn't work? Or what would they do? Or would they say, you're stacking the deck against us, these are not valid, so how would they respond, right? So I'll share with you the data in a second. So that's how they define competence. Confidence, they ask the question, my child believes that he or she can succeed and do what's needed to do well in the family, in school, in social situations with friends and adults. Oh, yeah, so it's the same thing as competence, but my child believes that they can succeed in that way. Connectedness, my child has positive relationships with his parents or siblings, other family members, and with friends, teachers, coaches, mentors. Right? You can still fill this out if you don't have a coach in your life. It's really a summary statement of that experience of relatedness. Caring, my child cares about other people. He or she is concerned about whether others have what they need and shows a sense of compassion. My child is both sympathetic and empathetic to others. Character, my child knows what's right and wrong, does the right thing. My child is open to others' perspectives and believes social justice for all. My child's honest. And finally, my child tries to do things to help the family, to help neighbors, and to help the community. My child tries to also help himself by staying healthy, right? So in reading this, some people might say, well, not all of these things might apply to somebody with ASD or somebody with an intellectual disability. Why are you doing that? So how do parents, in terms of parents of youth with developmental disabilities, those with autism and those with intellectual disability without autism, how would they say in terms of when we gave them these 6 statements? Right? We expected these to be pretty low, okay? Actually, I didn't know what to expect, but I had this expectation that it would come back saying not applicable or very low. So we asked them to rate how much they agree with this, and what you see here is the percentage of the parents who agreed with those statements about their kids, okay? So what do we see overall? That about 50% of parents agreed with the competence statement, either agreed or strongly agreed with it. Almost 60% agreed or strongly agreed with confidence. And look at the high rates around connectedness, right? Around almost 90% of the caregivers agreed with that statement about connectedness that I talked about before, okay? Still very high rates around caring. Overall, you can see not everybody, so this is interesting. There was variability. Not everybody was agreeing with the statement, but a substantial subgroup was. So it gives us a starting point with which to say, why are groups different? Why are people different? Why do some people agree and others not? to these same statements? How do they differ? How are they similar? Okay, can we develop a model of this? Now, these rates, I don't want you to go home and say 90% of youth with developmental disabilities are connected. Okay? This is a study of sport development that we use this in. So these are all athletes who are in Special Olympics in Ontario. Okay, and I'll share more with you. So it's a subsection, this is a subgroup. They're already involved in a recreation activity in some way. So in some way, it's not a representative sample. But it's still a controlled sample with which to ask that question within that context. Why do some kids have that connectedness or that caring and other ones not? Okay, do you guys get, is that fair? All right, so we had that dynamics of mental health problems that Wood and Godot talks about. Well, we can also have a conceptualization of thriving, right? A similar interaction between, so what goes into thriving? Lerner suggests there's two main components that feed originally into those 6 C's. One are the individual strengths that a person brings to the table, right? Language skills, academic skills, emotional skills. There's a whole list, and then beyond that, there could be any strengths that you bring to the table. But it's not sufficient. The experience of thriving is not sufficient. You can't do that alone based on your strengths. What you need is an alignment with your ecology. What you need is a fit between your strengths, okay, and your context. Your contexts, plural, because you're not in just one context. So what are the assets or the strengths? What's available and what's a good alignment or fit with who you are and what you bring to the table in your home, your family life, in your school or your vocational world, and in your community. And when there's a good fit, the concept is that when there's a good fit, you develop more of these 6 C's. And as you develop more of these 6 C's, you grow as a person, and you also impact your environment in a way that fosters a greater sense of alignment or fit. Okay? This is a conceptual notion, and they go through great pains of saying, okay, what goes into these internal strengths or these intrinsic strengths, and what are the important ingredients in these ecological assets? Okay? And if you're the Search Institute, you say there's 40 individual strengths and 40 ecological assets. If you're Richard Lerner, you say there's 8 of this kind and 8 of that kind. So there's lots of debate about how many actually go in. And frankly, I'm not interested in that at this point. What I'm interested in is, for this conversation, and what we can talk about with the panel afterwards as well, is what are the important things that matter to you that should go in to people that you love and that you care about or that you work with, into internal assets and strengths, and in terms of the ecology.